Okay, so my name is Erin. I work at Barnes& and Noble in Syracuse, the DeWitt one on Erie Boulevard, if you're familiar. I'm a children's lead. I've been working there for about 5 years and 3 or 4 years now, hard to keep track, as the children's lead. Um, for this one in particular, for this presentation, I was just asked about different diverse books that really stand out this year. Because of everything going on, obviously, there's been changes going on. Based on what I'm seeing selling in stores, that's kind of where I was going with this presentation and things that caught my eye, things that I would encourage to have in the classroom. Let's keep things around. So obviously COVID did shift a lot of focus on what was being published for the year, um, along with all of the other political things going on. A lot of dates got moved around, so things got a little complicated. Um, Black voices were highly encouraged and promoted this year fantastically. There's a lot of brilliant stories being told right now. Asian stories are being told with a little more frequency. We're still seeing a really limited Native and Indigenous voice presence. So it's something to keep your eyes out for. There's been a couple that have been released, and I'll talk about at least one. And something that we are constantly encouraging and promoting in our store as well. So we don't obviously have a hand in publishing itself, but we are putting out different merchandise and different showcases that just reflect what we're seeing and what we really enjoy. The past couple of years, disabilities were being emphasized, but this year it kind of seemed to be less of a focus. I would wager it's because we were looking at more Black voices and more Asian stories being promoted, but still really good choices coming out. I have a couple of resources. I put them at the beginning just so they'd be easy for all of you to find if you wanted to look at this later. I use a lot of hashtags when I'm looking for things like these just because they are super useful and social media has been amazing. One of the most popular ones is own voices, looking at stories that's just told by the same people that they're writing about. So if a Black author is writing about a Black character, or if a deaf author is writing about a deaf character, and then those experiences that they have insight into. There's a newer app from about the past year or so. It's called We Read Too. You can find it on the Apple Play Store or the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. It's really well formatted. It's easy to navigate. It's got quite a few titles for older books, and they're constantly updating it as they reference and go through and identify what identities they're dealing with. One of my hands down favorite websites is LGBTQ Reads. They have a lot of ages and identities that are broken up and they're easy to navigate. So if you're looking at the top of their website, you can find things based on the age, or you can look at different identities such as a trans narrative, a non-binary, bi, straight, or sorry, not straight, lesbian, gay, etc. Diverse Books is a nonprofit organization that advocates for diversity. They also have a tool called Our Story, which is available on the site. It's really super simple to navigate through. It's basically like you choose what you want to read about, and then it'll find books according to that age. And then I included Barnes & Noble because locally, we're actually now being allowed to do more displays that are either specific to our location or what we are really interested in seeing and selling. So as you're going back to stores, hopefully in the next year or so, you may start to see more of those displays that have, let's just say, more diversity recognized. It's going to obviously depend on whatever store is local to you, and it's not going to be a yes or no thing. It's going to be dependent on the booksellers that are there, but especially in our store, we have an emphasis on making sure that our community feels welcomed into that store, and that's sort of the message that we're putting forth as a company now. So to knock it off, I'm going to go kind of by ages. So I'm starting with picture books to begin with. The first one up here that I have is called First Laugh, Welcome Baby. So this might not be appropriate for your classroom, but it could teach about another organization. Hi, sorry, I have a cat over here. Or not organization, I said. This is a story about the Navajo, and when a child laughs for the first time, they're welcomed into the community. It recently came out this year. It was a gorgeous story. And like I said, I haven't seen a lot of representation for the Navajo Nation, so I thought that this was a really lovely book to share. I have up top here Benny's True Colors, and this is a trans narrative. Benny is a little bat and is going through life and just looking at the butterflies and really admiring them and feeling drawn to them, and realizes that he too is a butterfly, and he sleeps during the nighttime and is awake during the daytime and has all of these same stories that's shared with the butterflies, trying to relate to them. And it goes through the entire thing, talking to his family and what they're trying to comprehend because they don't see him as a butterfly. And it gets through the ending and it's recognized that Benny is a butterfly. It did a really good job of explaining what it was like for a trans person to go through trying to communicate with their family and what sort of responses they may have. This one didn't focus on negativity, which was really nice. It really focused on welcoming a person and recognizing who they were as truly within themselves. And then I have Bedtime Bonnet down here, which I thought was a wonderful insight into the Black community. It really talks about just what it's like for hair care, and I haven't seen a book in particular that deals with bonnets. There's quite a few that deal with the different hairstyles that we're seeing, and wonderfully. I think I have a couple more on the list that I'll provide for you today. But Bedtime Bonnet was a really sweet bedtime story, getting ready for bed, and in a really culturally sensitive way. Also included Swashby and the Sea, which is about a young girl who goes to the beach. She absolutely loves being there, and she meets this really grumpy Gus of a guy who wants pretty much nothing to do with her. He lives on the beach. He's really enjoying where he's at. He just doesn't want to interact with anybody. And this sweet little girl gets to know him, and she goes on an adventure with him and kind of gets him to break out of his shell. Danby is kind of a similar breaking out of your shell story. She's moved from, I can't quite remember which country it was, but she moves to America. She's going to school and she's trying to communicate with her new class and just not quite getting it. So she makes up a little game of her own, and she leads everybody in this little school parade and gets everybody on board. And it was another one of those stories where it's just a really sweet, encouraging kids to connect with one another and enjoying each other's differences. Your Name is a song I think is super, super important. I will have all of these, by the way, in a list that also provides the author's names. So even though they're blocked on here, you're going to have a list provided after. So Your Name is a song that focuses on a young girl who's just come back from school. And she's talking with her mother, and she's very frustrated because she was being made fun of because of her name and how it's pronounced, or how the teacher was struggling to pronounce it. And they walk through the entire story talking about the heritage of names, why those names are important, if people can learn to say certain names that they might think are difficult, like Tchaikovsky was one I think they use as an example. If people can learn to say names like those, then it's just as easy to learn to say their names. On top of that, it looks at different cultures. So towards the ending of the book, they start talking about, I think there's a couple of Asian characters in it that they reference their names, and there's a young girl named Siobhan. So they talk about how the spelling shouldn't affect how people try to learn the name when you're telling them your name. This has been a really big topic lately across a lot of platforms. So I thought it was important when it did get published that we included it for all educators. I think it's something that kids are going to want to see. They're going to want to know that they're welcomed into the class. And this is a really easy one to just say, like, hey, your name is important and you are important. So welcome to my classroom and you teach me how to say something. Eyes That Kiss in the Corners is super cute. This is an Asian story and focuses on the little girl talking about how her eyes do look different from her classmates, and her mother and her grandmother both talk to her about how it's just that their eyes kiss in the corners. And there's some history in it, very minimal. It just touches on more of the grandmother's story and how she comes to America. Um, but the illustrations are beautiful. A lot of the ones in here I've included, based on personal preference, honestly, is that they're just gorgeous illustrations as well as beautiful stories. Um, and this one in particular, I haven't seen a lot of Asian stories as much as I've seen a lot of Black people of color stories this year. And so a lot of them I wanted to highlight just so that we did know that they are out there. The next slide I have, these are different picture books that are really cute in the narrative, and their illustrations are gorgeous. I think it's important that we're also providing stories for students that aren't just about just your heritage and just looking at that and saying you're important for this that you bring. It's important to have a book available to them that says, hey, you're just here. You can see yourself in this story. This story is really fun. You can have adventures as well. And I think these three are really good illustrations for that. Grace in the Box is about a young girl who's using her imagination, and she finds this giant box from a refrigerator and turns it into her best friend box. And so Box goes on adventures with her. He gets a little soggy, he gets a little beaten up, and she always is working to make sure that he's taken care of and that he gets fixed up. Um, there's another conflict in there that I won't spoil for you all, but it's a very sweet one that goes on to encourage kids just to use your imagination and have fun. That just because something is a box doesn't mean it has to stay a box. It could be a rocket ship, it could be a ship on the sea, and to just have fun. Similar to that is My Rainy Day Rocket Ship, and it's a super rainy day, can't go outside, so the little boy in this is at home trying to find something to do and has this whole little daydream about being in a rocket ship and going and exploring. And the parents end up going on a little adventure with him too. And it just ends up being a really nice, again, a really nice imagination and how important it is to have that. How you shouldn't be afraid to just think outside of the box and enjoy yourself and find a way to amuse yourself while you're kind of stuck inside, which aren't we all right now? Una is one that I haven't seen much talk about yet. This is a little mermaid who is trying super, super hard to get a small treasure on the bottom of the seafloor. And she has to keep thinking of ways to do it. She goes through experiment after experiment after experiment, trying to find a way to just reach this one little sliver of a treasure out of her grasp, and eventually manages to do it. It does focus on invention and ingenuity. encouraging people to persevere, not being scared of trying and failing, because you might learn out of a failure, and really focuses on reminding kids that they're super smart, and just because you failed at something doesn't mean that you've done something bad or wrong. It just means that that didn't work this time, but you have something that you can learn from it. And I've moved up from the picture books there. I have well over 25 to show you all on this list. I didn't include all of them as images just because it would take quite a bit of time to go through all of them. But moving into, these are our emergent readers, and these are just a handful that I think are superb. We've just seen an increase in them this year. So some have been released for a little bit longer than this past year, or I think 2019 might be the extent. Mindy Kim got released, I believe, in 2019, but has consistently been releasing a couple of books every year. So there's about 4 or 5 in the series now, and features a young girl who lives with her father. I can't quite remember if her mother is just out of town or had recently passed away, but it does focus on a single father and his child, and specifically on how she's sharing her culture in schools. There's the Lunar New Year parade, which I have featured up here, and then there's one where she's like a class president. So really just, again, showing kids that they can do whatever they set their mind to. And then Camilla down here, this one is Latinx. So she is, I know she's gone on to be some sort of a, she might have a class president one as well. And then there's about 4 or 5 in that series. A lot of these put out 2 to 3 per year. And this one in particular comes from the same line as a couple I'll be talking about next. The company called Lendtree, I believe. No, not Lendtree. Not going to remember it now that I'm trying to. Their publishing company has been putting out several and focuses on different representations. Each one has been really good for, I would put these around right above our emergent readers. So right in our beginning reader before they're moving on to chapter books. They are pretty easy readers in general, and then quick reads. So there's not a lot of pages involved in them. And then Ty's Travels here is part of, you can see here, our I Can Read series. That this is the My First, so right in here. And those are our emergent readers. So those are 1 to 2 sentences on the page. Ty has about 4 books, I believe, and each one focuses on a different sort of travel or a different way of getting around with friends. They're super imaginative, and Ty is constantly finding an amazing way to get through whatever project they're working on. I Love Being Me just came out this year. We saw a huge spike in our personal store, and kids were just loving it. You can see there's a lot of different skin tones on the cover, and the girls all have different hairstyles. And we had a lot of kids in class or in the store saying that they were really excited to like see themselves on the cover. And it's just a really simple, like, you're glorious, you're wonderful, you're a great kiddo, enjoy being you because you're awesome. And who doesn't like hearing that every now and then? These ones are pretty exciting. These are our chapter books. And for these in particular, I've got one on the screen for She Persisted, and this is Florence Griffith Joyner. Now, She Persisted is also part of the series that's written by Chelsea Clinton. There are 3 books now that are picture books. They're nonfiction picture books talking about different women. Each one features about 13 women. And on particular themes. These, however, they're just putting out chapter books, and there are 8 that are published. There's one about Harriet Tubman, one about Claudette Colvin, Sally Ride, Virginia Apgar, Sonia Sotomayor, Nellie Bly, Florence Griffith Joyner, and Ruby Bridges. So they're going to be putting out more of these, but they're a little lesser known at the moment just because they're so new. And I think that they're really nice to have for kids that do like the biography aspect or want to learn about somebody that they haven't heard about yet. Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls, if you're not very familiar with it, I highly recommend. There are 3 books in that series as well, including one about immigrant stories. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's a bright yellow cover. It's pretty hard to miss if it's in the store. But as far as chapter books are going, they're putting out their own series as well. And so the one I have up here is Dr. Wangari Maathai. And there are 5 out at the moment. Alicia Alonso, the Dr. Wangari Maathai, Yunko Tabe, Madam C.J. Walker, and Ada Lovelace. So these are pretty thin. They are hardcovers. They're about, let's say, under 100 pages. And you can get them in a full set. These are a little more challenging. The normal Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls is about a page per person for a biography, but it covers a wide variety of people, a wide variety of women, and different time periods. So it's nice to look at a modern woman versus somebody who may have been in an older time period and known for making some sort of a change on our communities. Over here, we have The Magnificent Makers. There's a few different representations in this series, but it highlights STEM technology for kids, which we definitely want to encourage. There's a few books in this so far. I believe it's up to number 3, and they're a pretty easy chapter book. They're a good step from going from our beginning readers and moving right in between our young readers, which is how we gauge where kids are in our stores. This series down here is Very Important to People. There's only 2 so far. There's Lewis Latimer and Mae Jemison. And these just got released in January of this year. I know that they're planning on more. I do not know who the people that they're going to focus on are, but myself being unfamiliar with Lewis Latimer, I was really excited to see the series in store, and it was one that we have struggled to keep on our shelves. So it's definitely resounding with people. Over here, I have a couple of graphic novels. There's Beetle and the Hollow Bones, which is actually an LGBTQ representation. The little goblin here, she ends up having a girlfriend, but it focuses on a story of trying to help one of your friends if they're in trouble. It is a little bit of an older book, but it's young enough that if a kid was just flipping through it, they could understand the story, and the images are wonderful and highly recommend that one. Seance Tea Party is probably on your higher end of your elementary school again, but it's looking at as kids move from elementary into middle school and how they may start to feel alienated. In particular, this one focuses on a young girl who all of her friends are moving into middle school with her, and they're starting to like boys and like girls and want to talk about all of that and how great makeup is and how wonderful all of these exciting things are that they're growing into. But she doesn't feel that connection. She's not quite at that point in her life where she wants to do that. She's really enjoying going outside and just celebrating things and still hanging out and just playing around. And so she befriends this little ghost of a girl. And they go out and they have fun, and they are just really continuing to be low key and not interested in boys or girls, not interested in all of the drama that might exist in middle school, and just really trying to understand their identity. Um, I think it's a good bridge for kids, especially because we know that that idea of alienation exists, that sometimes we do have somebody who is dragging their feet on that sort of development or just not quite up to the pace. And they want to feel seen as well. They may not want to be reading something like drama from Telga Mayer, where it focuses on the dramatics in middle school. They may want to see themselves reflected in a book that is going to talk about how, yeah, you can take your time. It's fine. There's no rush on this. And then these are young reader books. So they may not be as applicable to you, but I think that they're important books for folks to know about. If you have a more advanced reader or you want some sort of a read aloud, these may be good options. My favorite on this entire page is Dragons in a Bag. This is by Zeta Elliott, and Zeta has quite a few books out at the moment that have all fallen into this diversity. I recommend that author to no end. Everything that they've put out, I've been amazed by and enjoyed. So Dragons in a Bag is about a young boy who goes to stay with his grandma, and his mom has to go to a court meeting, and so he's dropped off with his grandma and spending the day, and somehow discovers a bunch of dragons in the apartment, and he goes to help his grandma protect them. There's a whole bunch of chaos that ensues, and there's a following book called Dragon Thief, if that gives you any idea of what happens. They're pretty easy young reader books, which would be our next bridge from chapter books. This one is, I would say maybe third, fourth grade reading level. And I think it's one that I haven't seen a lot of books touching upon, like a broken family or more of a discovered family. And this one definitely does the entire time. And it's just a fun fantasy adventure. Jacqueline Woodson, if you're familiar with her, she also wrote Brown Girl Dreaming. And that is a verse book. So it's all told in poetry. This one focuses on a young boy whose father is a football player, and he has been really phenomenal. He's a great athlete, but a lot of the concussions have started taking their toll. And now his father is dealing with a lot of memory loss and struggling to keep time. And so the story itself is about that kid reconciling with what's going on with his father. And eventually his father actually forgets his name, his child's name. So he's trying to deal with how he can relate with his father now and how they can acclimate to their new normal. Woodson's writing is phenomenal. She does a brilliant job of making sure that even though everything is told in verse, it's all very clear and coherent, a lot like Kwame Alexander's writing. And the entire thing has one full narrative. So it's not just one poem over and over. It's a bunch of poems that add up into the narrative. Ghost Squad. I'm sure you all have some students who just absolutely love a creepy book. This one is on the more childish side of creepy, so it's not a bunch of scary demons or anything going on. There are ghosts, but the Ghost Squad is trying to make sure that they're safe and helped. And they're just kind of hanging out with these ghosts over time. A little bit more like a Disney Scream themed sort of movie. And then Nick Stone started writing in young reader. So Nick Stone is known in YA, or what we call our teen, for Dear Martin. And this one is called Clean Getaway. This focuses on using the Green Book, which if you're not familiar with is a way of identifying safe places to stay as you travel across the United States as a Black person. Places where you may not face as many restrictions as you would in another state, or you may be safer because you may not face more racism there. So in this, the young boy is going on an adventure with his grandmother, and they use the Green Book while they're going through the states just to kind of see what it's like. Nick Stone obviously is a well-known author and has phenomenal writing as well. So even though this is an older book, I think it introduces, older as in older age group, I think this is an important book to know about and to potentially share, just because it does bring up the topic of the Green Book, which is not known as well as I think could be. We're obviously in the New York area, but I think that might be one of the reasons why Green Book isn't as well talked about. But it's an important one, and bringing it that low for our kids is a really easy way to start introducing those difficult topics. And I think that was my last slide. I do have, unfortunately, I don't have the pictures up right away, but there have been some really good picture books that have been coming out that are nonfiction picture books. Things like, sorry, I have a cat again talking. Things like Swish, which is about the Harlem Globetrotters. That one just got released, I think, in the past month or so. Brilliant illustrations, and just talks about how important they are to culture as a whole. There was a book produced called Sprouting Wings, and that is about the first African-American pilot to fly across the US. One that's not quite happy, but super important to talk about. It's called Unspeakable, the Tulsa Race Massacre. And this is about the 1921 massacre that took place in Tulsa. It's just been released either this month or the next month, I believe. And we're definitely going to be featuring it and talking about it. I think this is another one of those cases where it's important to talk about these situations with our kids and to let them know. It's definitely going to be aimed a little bit higher for elementary, but one to look out for. And then, not released yet, there is a book coming out from Erin Beatty. And if you know the name, you probably know it from Iggy Peck Architect or Ada Twist Scientist. And he's coming out with Aaron Slater Illustrator. And this is going to feature a young Black boy who loves drawing and illustrating and creating gorgeous pieces of artwork. So I'm going to scoot back up here. Like I said, with resources, obviously, if you're not in the Syracuse area, going to any of your Barnes & Noble folks, we're all happy to talk about books almost all day long. We see all the new stuff come in. It's sometimes hard to keep track of, because what's really new to us is something either you guys may not have heard, or you're thinking of something that is old to us that would be just difficult to keep chronologically. But come in, ask questions. We're happy to hang out. I'm gonna get this little cat. Hold on one second. Sorry, guys. I'm sure you all have had to deal with that all year. So I do recommend having those conversations with the people that work in the stores. If you don't have a Barnes & Noble near you, feel free to call the most local one. I know we can talk on the phone for a while and get you some recommendations, whatever you're looking for. If you want to come up with your own list, these different websites that I provided are phenomenal, and I'll have a list of about 80 books available for you after this as well. And then this We Read 2 app like I said, it's super easy to navigate. And if you want something specific, dealing with a disability or dealing with a particular identity, it's easily one of my favorites. I don't know, I have the time if anybody had a question about anything. I didn't know if you would like to do that. Allison? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you wanna, we can open it up, and if there's any specific, oh, somebody unmuted. Let's let them go.
All right.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi. The book that you mentioned, Unspeakable. What
Mhm.
what age level would you say that would be a good read for? Because I don't want to terrify kids either. It's a
Right.
pretty horrible subject.
Absolutely. I have not personally gone to see it in person yet. I don't know that our store has just gotten it.
Okay.
From what I could see, I would probably put it around probably third grade. I am so sorry for this cat in the background. So sorry. I'm used to doing this at work where it's much quieter. Yeah, I would say it's probably closer to like third, fourth, just because it is obviously a terrible thing that happened. I don't, like I said, I haven't seen the images myself, so I don't know how graphic they might be, but at least worth seeing and checking out.
I've seen advanced advertising for it, but hadn't actually handled it or been able to read it. So that's why I kind of asked that question, just in case you had seen it, completely already.
Yeah.
The other one that I was curious about was the one, hold on, I'm just checking the notes.
Mhm.
Oh, it's the Woodson one where dad is losing his memory because of all the concussions from sports. Was
Yes.
there a particular age level you thought that might be good for, or is it gentle enough even for kindergarten?
That is, let's see. I think based on how complicated it could be, I think I would put it closer to if you were doing like a read aloud or something.
Right.
More around second, third. It is an older, it's a young reader. And because it's told in verse, I think that might obviously add to the complication. But I would definitely put it closer to second, third, just because of the emotional complication. I don't know that kindergarten and first would have as much experience or kind of be able to wrap their heads around it as well.
Is the idea just memory, or is it obvious that dad's like having advanced dementia?
It's pretty obvious that it's more than just memory. It's the direct result of the concussions that he was having, and it leads into how complicated it is for that kid to see their like heroic dad suddenly not as able to interact with people around him.
It reminds me a little bit. I don't know. The book's been around for a while, and probably most of the folks here, if they have an elementary library, have a copy of it. But you remember Annie and the Old One, which was about a grandmother who was aging and getting ready to die, essentially?
I don't know that one.
Oh, to me, it kind of speaks to that same type of vulnerability.
Hmm.
Someone that you revere or care a lot about isn't going to be there for you anymore, or isn't the relationship's not going to be the same.
Yeah, that definitely sounds similar to it. That's a great reference.
Yeah, I see a lot of nodding in the cameras. We do have one question in the chat, Erin. It says, can you repeat the name of the book about the illustrator?
Oh, that is Aaron, Aaron, Slater, Slater, and the author is Aaron, Aaron, Beatty, Beatty. And I'll have that on the list that I send out to y'all as well.
And just so everyone on the call knows, so I've been communicating with Erin, and I'll send those to your SLS coordinators, your BOCES representative, and they'll forward them on, as well as a link to the recording. We can do.
Great, thank you. That way we can use it for the ones that we want to go ahead and order. So
Oh, yeah,
that should
absolutely.
work well.
Wanted to make it easy for you. One I didn't mention already, but there's a new version of Little Mermaid being put out by Brian Pinkney. The illustrations, the Little Mermaid is Black, and she is stunning because the Pinkneys are brilliant illustrators. If you ever see the name Pinkney, Pinkney, it's a pretty safe bet for a book. They have The Lion and the Mouse, and they're strong illustrators, beautiful, diverse books. Their whole family basically writes and illustrates different picture books, so can't recommend that name enough.
Erin,
Mhm.
I'm an elementary librarian at Brownville, New York.
Mhm.
And I just went and checked my shelf for Jacqueline Woodson.
Mhm.
And I think I would put her books more at the 5th or 6th grade level than like the 2nd or 3rd grade. They're definitely a little bit more intense, and you know, some of the topics I think she deals with are a little bit too much for maybe a 2nd, 3rd grader.
Okay, that's great advice. Like I said, I'm not as good with the younger ones there. That's why I would encourage all of you to check these out personally. I do have these books broken up in age ranges. So the young readers are closer to the bottom, and those are definitely the ones I would look at for your classroom more closely. Like you said, it could definitely be higher than I'm thinking. Anybody else have a question? Well, if anybody would like, you're welcome to contact my store even. Like I said, I work at the Syracuse Barnes & Noble in DeWitt. So if you want, I'll include the phone number for the store in the information that I send over, but you're welcome to call to ask about any of the books that we've got featured or any that we might have seen recently. I do have a limited perspective. I will put that out there. Absolutely. I am looking at what we're getting in most recently, and those are the books that I share with you folks, what I think is reflective of the diversity that we want to be sharing with people. But I certainly don't know all of the books that are out there. So feel free, if you're ever curious and you want to know what we're featuring in the store, you can always give us a call.
Great, thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm gonna put the sign-in sheet in the chat one more time for everyone, if you missed it. And again, we'll make sure that we get all that stuff to you. I'm excited to see the full list too, Erin. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Lots of thank yous.
I don't know what the Zoom protocol is. Would you like me to just stop and head out?
Yeah, I'll pause the recording, and I think everybody's heading off. So thank you, Erin.
Thank you.